Why questioning welfare triggers pure rage. We're tackling one of the most emotionally charged topics out there, the notion that the state should provide endless welfare as a right, that people are somehow entitled to live off the productive efforts of others through government programs. We'll examine the psychology behind that sense of entitlement, the fierce resistance to any questioning of it, and especially that deep underlying fear of what real self-reliance would actually mean if the transfers ever stopped. Buckle in, because we're going to dismantle the whole case for these systems using nothing but clear logic, incentives, moral consistency, and what we observe about human nature. Imagine for a moment a system where one group is compelled to hand over their earnings so another group can receive them without a direct exchange of value. Proponents call this compassion, security, a safety net for the vulnerable. But let's peel that back. At its core, this setup creates a powerful illusion that wealth appears by magic from the state rather than being produced by individuals through effort, risk, and voluntary cooperation. When you make resources available without requiring anything in return or tying them to building independence, you change the calculations people make. Why push hard to develop skills, save, or build relationships that provide mutual support when the alternative is guaranteed flows that require no reciprocity? This isn't judgment on individuals. It's how incentives work on ordinary human beings who respond to costs and benefits just like anyone else. The entitlement mindset doesn't spring up overnight. It grows when people experience prolonged reliance. What starts as temporary help for genuine hardship becomes a way of life, and over time the mind adapts. Self-efficacy, that inner belief that you can handle challenges, weakens. You see patterns where folks limit their own earnings deliberately to avoid losing benefits, not because they're lazy by nature but because the system punishes stepping up. The fear of the so-called cliff is real. Suddenly having to cover housing, food, and basics without the buffer feels like stepping off a ledge into the unknown. That fear is visceral, a dread of physical existence without the intermediary taking from others to give to you. It's why challenges to the setup trigger such intense backlash. For many, it isn't abstract policy debate. It feels like a threat to survival itself after years of conditioning that independence is risky or impossible. Think about the moral angle here. True compassion involves voluntary giving, personal sacrifice, and direct connection between helper and helped. It builds gratitude, accountability, and often real uplift because both sides have skin in the game. Forced extraction through the state removes all that. The producer doesn't choose and often never sees the recipient. The recipient doesn't face the natural feedback of needing to demonstrate value or reliability to earn support. This severs the human bonds that make charity meaningful and effective. Instead, we get bureaucracy, waste, and a growing class of administrators whose jobs depend on the system continuing. Morally, this is coercion dressed up as kindness. If I take your property at gunpoint and give it to someone else, the act doesn't become virtuous just because I call it a program or claim good intentions. The end doesn't justify the means when the means violate the principle that no one has a right to the fruits of another's labor without consent. If this episode challenged your thinking or connected the dots on these critical ideas, please hit like, share it with someone who needs to hear this perspective, subscribe for more unfiltered explorations of freedom and incentives, and drop a comment below with your thoughts or experiences. Your engagement helps these conversations reach further. Now layer on the practical destruction. These programs distort decisions at every level. Families form differently when benefits reward single parenthood or penalize marriage through joint income tests. Work effort drops because the marginal reward for extra hours shrinks or vanishes. Savings and investment decline because why build a buffer when the state is positioned as the perpetual provider? Over generations, this creates pockets where dependency becomes normalized, passed down not just economically but culturally. Children grow up seeing the world as one where provision comes from distant authority rather than personal agency and mutual exchange in the free market. The result is lower mobility, weaker communities, and human potential left unrealized. Data consistently shows that while short-term aid can blunt immediate hardship, long-term open-ended transfers correlate with stagnation, higher rates of family breakdown, and mental health struggles like depression and anxiety tied to the helplessness of prolonged reliance. Proponents argue these systems reduce poverty and provide stability. But look closer. Official poverty metrics often ignore the massive in-kind transfers already happening, yet the behavioral poverty, the erosion of habits and skills needed for independence, deepens. What looks like compassion on the surface creates moral hazard on a societal scale. People take more risks or exert less effort knowing there's a backstop funded by others. Innovation and productivity suffer because resources are diverted from creators to consumption without corresponding production. The free market, by contrast, rewards value creation through voluntary trades. It lifts standards of living across the board as people compete to serve one another better. Historical periods with less intervention show stronger family structures and upward movement even among the poor, because necessity and opportunity sharpen ingenuity and responsibility. The fear of losing the flows reveals the fragility. Many trapped in the system express genuine terror at the thought of it ending. They worry about immediate destitution, lack of skills after years away from the workforce, or health issues without the coverage. This is understandable on a human level, but it highlights the trap. By making dependence comfortable enough, the system discourages the very adaptations that would eliminate the need for it. people stay in low-effort equilibria rather than investing in themselves. The fierce attacks on critics stem from this. Questioning the morality or sustainability feels like pulling the rug out from under an entire adapted way of life. It's easier to smear doubters as lacking empathy than to confront how the setup undermines the self-reliance that makes true security possible. Consider the broader cultural impact. When the state positions itself as the ultimate provider, it crowds out private charity, community networks, and family obligations. Voluntary mutual aid historically stepped in during hardship with personal knowledge of circumstances, reducing fraud and encouraging reciprocity. Government programs lack that discernment, leading to widespread abuse where resources go to those gaming the rules rather than the truly needy. This breeds cynicism among producers who see their earnings siphoned for outcomes that seem counterproductive. Resentment builds social cohesion phrase. Meanwhile, recipients can internalize an entitlement that further isolates them, viewing any expectation of work or behavioral change as oppression rather than path to dignity. Logically, the sustainability fails too. These programs expand because concentrated beneficiaries lobby hard while diffuse taxpayers bear the costs with less intensity. Politicians respond to visible votes and short-term optics over long-term incentives. Debt piles up, taxes rise, distorting the free market further and slowing growth that could otherwise raise all boats. We end up with more people needing support as the productive base weakens. It's a feedback loop where good intentions pave the road to bigger problems. Moral consistency demands we ask whether it's right to promise security by violating the rights of others to their own labor. If the principle is that every person owns the product of their effort, then systematic redistribution on this scale is institutionalized theft, however it's laundered through bureaucracy. Even the argument that some are unable to provide for themselves doesn't justify universal open-ended systems. Targeted, temporary, voluntary, or community-based help can address genuine cases without creating the dependency trap for the able-bodied. Work requirements, time limits, and incentives to build skills have shown in various experiments that they move people toward independence faster while preserving resources for those who truly cannot. The fear of physical existence without the system is real for some, but perpetuating the system to avoid that fear only grows the number who feel it. Breaking the cycle requires honest reckoning with human nature. We are not blank slates to be molded by planners. We respond to incentives, seek to minimize effort for given rewards, and thrive when responsible for our own outcomes. One powerful observation is how the entitlement spreads beyond direct recipients. Voters who benefit indirectly or ideologically defend the setup because it aligns with a vision of engineered equality through authority. They frame any cut or reform as cruelty, ignoring how the status quo harms the very people it claims to help by sapping initiative. This emotional defense often relies on stories of individual hardship while downplaying the aggregate data on work disincentives, family dissolution, and mental toll of dependency. Logic requires weighing the seen benefits against the unseen costs, the opportunities foregone when resources are seized and redirected. In the end, the moral case collapses because it treats some people as means to others' ends. A free market rooted in voluntary exchange respects each person's sovereignty. It allows charity that is genuine and effective. It encourages the habits that lead to widespread prosperity. The welfare state promises security but delivers fragility, entitlement, and fear. Real compassion builds people up to stand on their own, not keeps them tethered for political or emotional convenience. If you're wrestling with these ideas, reflect on your own life. Where have incentives shaped your choices? What would genuine independence look like in a world without forced transfers? The path forward isn't more programs, but restoring the cultural and economic foundations that reward responsibility. Thanks for joining me on this exploration. Until next time, keep questioning the easy answers and pursuing truth in how we organize society. Stay free.